Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. For our Mangalacharna this morning, we'll do from the Sri Caitanya Charitamrita. Vande Gurun Isha Bhaktan, if we have that. Do we have that in a nice PowerPoint? We do. This is the Mangalacharna, which is meant to set the mood for any book, also to invoke auspiciousness and to offer obeisances to the Supreme Lord and all the devotees. So we can say this together, and we can use this Mangalacharna regularly until everyone learns all the verses, and then we can always just sing it together wherever we go. Okay? Yes. Vande Gurun Isha Bhaktan Isha. Do the Bhakti David version. Vande Gurun Isha Bhaktan Isham Ishavatarakan Tat Prakasham Stachashakti Krishna Chaitanya Samjakam Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityanando Sahodito Gaudadai Pushpavanto Chitrao Shandao Tamondudao Yadadvaitam Brahmopanishadi Tarapya Satubha Yatmantarayami Purusha Iti So Shamshavi Bhavaha Shadaishvaryai Purnoya Iha Bhagavan Saswayamayam Nachetanyat Krishna Jagati Paratapvam Paramiha Anarpita Charim Chirat Karunayavatirna Kalau Samarpayitu Munatoj Valarasam Sabhaktishriyam Hari Purata Sundara Dyuti Kadamba Sandipita Sada Haraya Kandare Spurutu Vasachinandana Radha Krishna Pranaya Vikritir Ladini Shakti Rasmad Ekatmanab Api Bhuvi Pura Deha Bedham Kototao Chaitanyakyam Prakatamaduna Tadvayam Chaikyamaptam Radha Bhava Dyuti Suvalitam Naumi Krishna Sarupam Shri Radhaya Pranaya Mahima Kidrisho Vanayaiva Swadyo Yenad Bhuta Madhurima Kidrisho Vamadiya Saukyam Chasya Mad Anubhavata Kidrisham Beti Lobhat Tadbhavadya Samajani Shachi Garbha Sindho Harindu Sankarshana Karanato Ashayi Garbhodashayi Chapayobdishayi Sheshascha Yasyam Shakalasa Nitya Nandakya Rama Sharanam Vamastu Maya Tite Vyapi Vaikunta Loke Purnaishvarye Shri Chaturvyuha Madhye Rupam Yasyo Pati Sankarsanakyam Tam Shri Nityananda Ramam Prapadye Maya Bharta Janda Sangashrayanga Shete Sakshat Karanam Bodhi Madhye Yasyai Kamsha Shipuman Adidevas Tam Shri Nityananda Ramam Prapadye Yasyam Shamsha Shila Garbhodashayi Yanabhyabjam Lokasanghatanalam Lokashrastu Sutikadamadhatus Tam Shri Nityananda Ramam Prapadye Yasyam sham sham sha paratma kilanam Poshta Vishnur Bhati Tugdabdi Shayi Shauni Bharata Yatkala Sopyanantas Tam Shri Nityananda Ramam Prapadye Mahavishnu Jagat Karta Maya Yastrajatyada Tasyavatare Vayam Advaita Charya Ishvara Advaitam Harinadvaitar Acharyam Bhakti Shamshanad Bhaktavataram Isham Tam Advaita Charyam Ashraye Panchatattvatmakam Krishna Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Jayatam Suratau Pangor Mama Manda Matirgati Matsarvaswa Padam Bojao Radha Marana Mohano Divya Vrindaranya Kalpadrumadha Srimad Ratnagara Singhasanasto Srimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prishdalibhi Sevyamano Smarami Sriman Rasarasarambi Vamshivata Tatastita Karshan Venu Swaner Gopir Gopinata Shriyestunaha Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jai Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrind Etin Thakur Gauriyaki Karyatmani Atmasad Etin Charan Bandon Tine Moranat. Now, you don't have it on this slide deck, but look up the next two verses, 120 and 121. We should put those on the slide deck. They're really nice. They finish off the Mangalacharna. Adi 120, 121. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Grantera Ararambe Kari Mangalacharna Guru Vaishna Bhagavan Tinera Smarana. Let's see the English, please. English. In the beginning of this narration, simply by remembering the spiritual master, the devotees of the Lord and the personality of Godhead, I have invoked their benedictions. Tinera svarani hoy vigna vinashana anayase hoy nija vanchita purana. Such remembrance destroys all difficulties and very easily enables one to fulfill his own desires. What do you think? This is the sublime nature of the spiritual world and of devotional service, that in the material world, everyone's gone off track and trying to make their own plan to be happy. But it won't happen, because we're either instruments of material nature or we're instruments of Krishna. We're instruments in any case, because that's our nature. We're Tatastha Shakti. So I may think that I am my own person. I'm going to make my own plan, but that's not my own plan. That's material nature's plan. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. People who think like that actually are very foolish because they're being controlled by the material nature. And Maya is writing a little script and says, here. And then I read it and I go, here's my plan. It's not a good plan because it's Maya's plan. Krishna already wrote a little script called the Bhagavad Gita and said, here's my plan. So if you take Krishna's plan, then you'll destroy all difficulties and very easily cross over the material nature and also fulfill all our desires. This is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam Tyakvasadharma Tyakvam Sudushida Saripshita Raja Lakshmi. No, it's the other one. Deyam Sada Paribhavagnam Abhishtadoham. Abhishtadoham means what we actually want, what actually fulfills our desires. And when you see it, you'll know it. In other words, when we actually are surrounded by sublime aesthetic beauty of the spiritual world, we're feeling it, and it's going into our soul, then we know we're happy. We don't have to have a certificate. We feel it directly for ourselves, and we know that our desires are being fulfilled one after another. In fact, they're being fulfilled so automatically and completely that we feel that it's over and beyond what I could have actually desired. Therefore, Krishna's name is Vanchahatita, which means he goes beyond our expectations in fulfilling our desires. So the way to fulfill one's desires actually is to remember the Lord. And in this Mangalacharna, we invoke such auspiciousness by remembering the spiritual masters. We remember Lord Caitanya, Lord Nityananda, all the Panchatattva. And then we remember the Krishna's purpose in coming to the material world and the way that we're situated in the material world, how it's being upheld by Balaram, and how we can rise above it and go to Vrindavan. And there we worship the three deities, 18 in our Thakur. There's three main deities of Vrindavan that we worship. And this morning we sang the names of all the various deities. So one way to live in Vrindavan, which is one of the elements of Panchangam Bhakti. Panchangam Bhakti means that there are 5 processes of bhakti that are so powerful that even if you don't have faith in them, but you have a little connection with them, then you'll make rapid advancement in devotional service. And so one of the ways to live in Vrindavan is one thing that helps is to plan to go there. Even if it's far off, then you'll be thinking, I have to get ready to go Vrindavan. And even if you don't have a ticket, you can still be thinking, I want to be in Vrindavan. And while you're anywhere, you can be preparing, and in the preparation, you'll actually go to Vrindavan to live there. So we're going to go to the Holy Dham, Krishna willing, around December 23rd. Actually, 24th? Okay. I think I'm actually going earlier. I'm going to go during Kartik. So I'm getting ready for Kartik. I'm already making plans about what we're going to read and what we're going to do there, which places we're going to. And then also, some of us are going all together to Vrindavan. We're going to Jagannath Puri, and we're going to Mayapur Dham around the 24th. And we're going to have big kirtans, and we're going to have prasadam, book distribution. We're going to go to holy places. But it doesn't mean that we can't go there now, because it's absolute. And one way to develop attraction for the Dham is to start meditating on the various places in the Dham now, where Lord Caitanya performed his pastimes. So since we're going to start in Jagannath Puri, we'll today discuss a little bit about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's arrival in Jagannath Puri. You know, he took sannyas and he traveled from Navadvip all the way to Jagannath Puri. Before he got there, he had a slight incident with his danda. He had handed it over to Lord Nityananda to watch out for, because sannyasi also has a few things like a water pot and a danda to carry. And Caitanya Mahaprabhu was a new sannyasi. He was carrying his danda everywhere. He asked Nityananda Prabhu to take care of it. And did he take care of it? Boy, did he ever. He broke it into pieces and threw it into the Bunga Nadi. So there's a place there in Jagannath Puri called the Danda Bunga Nadi. It means the place where the danda of Lord Chaitanya was broken and thrown into the river. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu got back and asked for his danda back, Nityananda said, Prabhu said, "Oh, I think you broke it." Of course, they're the same person. And Nityananda Prabhu is bringing out Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's godhood to everybody. In fact, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked his followers to go door to door and teach everyone to chant Hare Krishna, Nityananda Prabhu didn't do that. He actually went door to door and he told everyone, chant Gauranga. Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in the Kali Yuga, is Krishna's most merciful manifestation, who's teaching everybody by example how to chant Hare Krishna. And Nityananda Prabhu didn't like all these formalities Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was apparently going through. In fact, most of his devotees didn't like it. They didn't like it when he left Navadvip. They didn't like it when he took sannyas and he shaved off his hair. They were always pining for him, and still they worship him in Navadvip, and still to this day, as he was there in Navadvip, dressed in his beautiful cloth and also with his beautiful hair and some ornaments and so forth. So Nityananda Prabhu told Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that I think the person who's complaining about this has also broken the danda. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu feigned anger, and he told his associates who were traveling with him that you can go behind me or ahead of me, but you can't go with me. I'm going to go alone. I'm a sannyasi. I shouldn't be subjected to all this anguish from traveling with others. So the devotees decided that they would go behind Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in case anything came up. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went ahead by himself to Jagannath Puri, and he reached the temple. And he went inside the Jagannath temple. And of course, the deity of Jagannath is none different from Krishna. It's Krishna in the mood of separation from the residents of Vrindavan. That's why his eyes are so big. And Balaram, he looks almost distorted. And this is one of the symptoms of ecstasy. In fact, the story is that Lord Krishna, pining for the residents of Vrindavan, then heard about their feelings of separation. And when he heard about their ecstasy and vipralamba, or separation from him, then his body transformed. So did Balaram and Subhadra. Arms retracted within the body, and eyes become gigantic and so forth. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu walked into the temple, he saw Krishna directly in the deity, and out of affection he wanted to embrace him. So he ran forward in the temple room, not realizing that there was some decorum to be observed there. And then he fainted before he reached the deity. And the custodian of the temple commander, came over with a stick, and he was going to beat him because he thought that here's some person making a scene inside the Lord's temple, and he wanted to set an example by driving him out. And before he could do that, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who's one of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's eternal associates, actually, who in this Leela had not met him yet, then just saw this beautiful sannyasi. He's 24 years old, body golden, Suvarna Varna Hemango Varnangashanshanangadi Sanyasya Krishma Shanto Nishta Shanti Purayanaha, as described in the Sri Vishnu Sahasranam Stotram. The body of the Lord is golden. He wears bangles of sandalwood, and he's always absorbed in ecstasy of Krishna consciousness. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya happened to be there, and he was a great scholar, the greatest scholar of India. Still, you can look him up on Wikipedia and find out how brilliant he was. Once there was a book, he memorized the whole book just by reading it once. And he knew everything. Some people say, I know everything, but they don't know anything. But Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, if he ever said it, I know everything, it would have been true. He knew all the Shastras. But he didn't know who this young man was, this sannyasi. So he went over and he was intrigued. And he did a little test by taking a piece of cotton swab and holding it near the nostril of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he could see that they were slightly moving, means the breath was there. And he had read about this in the Shastra, and he said this is a form of devotional ecstasy that he's in. Now at this point, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is playing as being a Mayavadi. That is someone who doesn't accept the personal form, spiritual form of God. Mayavadis think that when God comes in a bodily form, it's actually a manifestation of matter. But the real supreme is the unborn within that form. And that's all pervading, that's all of us, and everything's one. However, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Brahmano hi pratishtaham amritasya vyasya cha shashvatasya dharmasya sukasya kantikasya cha. That I'm the basis of the impersonal Brahman. It's emanating from me. There are many aspects of Brahman. Vadanti tattvavidas tattvam yaj jnanamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdite. Supreme Absolute, spiritual personality, actually has three features. It's personal, the localized aspect as the supersoul. That's a form, but it's there within every atom. Ekopyaso rachaditam jagananda kotim yachaktir asti jagananda chaya yadanta andantarasta paramanu chayantarastam govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. Krishna's in every atom, and he's also within our hearts. It's an expansion of Krishna. And then there's the impersonal Brahman, like the effulgent rays. So just like the sun has different aspects, there are the rays of the sun, there's the form of the sun, and within the sun, there's actually the sun god, Vivashwan, from whose body the rays are emanating. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya called his disciples and asked them to help bring him back to his home so he could observe him and take him out of harm's way. So the disciples carried him along. Beautiful transcendental body. You can imagine walking through the streets of Puri with this body. And the Chaitanya Bhagavat described how like a line of ants would carry something, if you've ever seen them. So all these disciples lined up and they were carrying the beautiful body of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu back to the house of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And there they set him down in an appropriate place. And Gopinath Acharya, who knew of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, came there. And there was a conversation between Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Gopinath Acharya, who was a pure devotee of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and knew about his godhood. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was unconvinced that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Gopinath Acharya basically told him, that's because you haven't received his mercy yet. And soon after coming to that home, the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had arrived there, and they they traced out the steps of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, asking what in the town of Puri, what had happened, where he'd gone. And they chanted loudly when they met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and he came back to external consciousness. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had taken a liking to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, attracted to this young sannyasi, and he had a fatherly-like approach. He said, let me help you. I want to, first of all, bring you to a higher caste of sannyasis, because there are different levels of sannyas. And according to the level, you take a particular name that designates you as a higher or lower type of sannyasi. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had said, let me reinitiate you into a higher level of sannyas. And Gopinath Acharya said, you don't know what you're talking about. This is the Supreme Personality of God at high, low. Everything emanates from him. And nonetheless, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was eager to educate this young man. And he thought, this is dangerous, actually. He took sannyas at 24. You're so beautiful. What's going to happen? This is for old people, actually, sannyas. Older, when everything's all physically washed up and you're ready to just walk away from everything. This is the idea. Of course, Prabhupada, when asked by a professor of religion, why is it that you're giving sannyas to so many young people? And Prabhupada, the professor said, it's for old people. And Prabhupada said, what is your definition of old? And the man couldn't say anything. So Prabhupada said, old means about to die. He said, can you say that you're any older or younger than any of them? Because nobody knows when they're going to die, right? So Caitanya Mahaprabhu sat with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya in a secluded place for 10 days, and Sarvabhauma gave his commentaries on the Vedanta Sutra, one after another. And Caitanya Mahaprabhu didn't say a word. Usually students will ask a question, well, Sensei, what about this, that? But he didn't say anything. And after 10 days, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya became suspect, and he said, well, wait a minute, are you actually hearing what I'm saying? Mahaprabhu said, yeah, I'm hearing it. He said, do you understand it? He said, well, I understand the Vedanta Sutra perfectly. I just don't appreciate your commentaries because they're like clouds that are covering the real meaning. And meanwhile, here's this elderly, scholarly person and a young sannyasi who says this after 10 days of Sarvabhauma expounding on the philosophy of Vedanta. So he said, well, what is your explanation? And when Caitanya Mahaprabhu began explaining the real meaning according to Sambandha, Abhigeya, and Prayojana, then the mind of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was captivated. He also, in that meeting, Mahaprabhu had asked Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya to explain the Atmarama verse, which he did in 3 or 4 ways. And then Caitanya Mahaprabhu explained it in multiple ways, not touching on the original points that Sarvabhauma had made. And the combination of these various commentaries that Mahaprabhu was giving had then touched the mind and heart of Sarvabhauma in such a way that he had an experience that this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nobody can talk like this. No one can have such an intellect. And then when his mind and heart started to open, then Caitanya Mahaprabhu revealed his form to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And in the Chaitanya Bhagavat version, it's mentioned that he says to him, do you still think that I need to be elevated to a higher level sannyas? Do you think I'm not eligible for sannyasi? And he showed his Narayan form to him. And in that place that's in Puri, there's actually, at least there used to be, it's kind of a travesty. Some of the original beautiful artwork, which is irreplaceable, has been painted over by these really primitive kind of artwork, gaudy type of stuff. In any case, we can still see pictures of the original artwork, and in that place, Caitanya Mahaprabhu manifested his form of Sadbhuj to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. That is the hands of Krishna, then there's Ramachandra with a bow and arrow, and then there's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with a water pot and a danda, like that. 1, 2, 3. And after this, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya surrendered to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, became his ardent follower. The next morning after this conversion, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had been early to the Jagannath temple, and he was bringing some Mahaprasadam to the house of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had been a very strict follower of rules and regulations. One of those regulations is that if you rise from bed, you don't touch anything until you've taken a complete bath. And these are smarta rules and regulations. But now his heart had changed, and when he saw Chaitanya Mahaprabhu coming down the road, he just got up from bed and ran out and immediately offered his dandavat obeisances. And Mahaprabhu said, here's Mahaprasadam. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya without considering taking a bath or doing anything, he just reached out his hand and he quoted, Nadesha niyamastata nakala niyamastatra praptamanam dhrutam shushter bhoktaram harir abravit. That if Mahaprasadam, he found some Purana, if Mahaprasadam is brought from a distant place, if it's stale, dried, or in any condition of life, you should immediately honor it. So he took it. And Mahaprabhu was completely satisfied that now he's been transformed, his heart's melted for Krishna. And Sarvabhauma wrote some verses to glorify Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in fact, Ujjvala Varana, Gauravara Deham, that's written by Sarvabhauma. So that song, which is sung by many Vaishnavas, I've heard it in Vrindavan, people sing it all the time. And it's an appropriate song to remember Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, especially in Puri. And it describes his beautiful form and all the features of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And of course, Sarvabhauma wrote these famous verses, Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga Shikshartameka Purusha Purana Shri Krishna Chaitanya Sharira Dhari Kripam Buddhir Yastapaham Prapadye. We could make a list of all these Kalan Nashtan Nijam Bhakti Yogam Ja Pradushkartam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nama Avirbhutas Tasya Vadara Vinde Gadam Gadam Liyatam Chitrabringa. These verses, he extols Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the one coming to teach bhakti, including knowledge and detachment from the world for the sake of performing pure devotional service, and that one should be like a honeybee to drink up the nectar that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is distributing, and so forth. So Sarvabhauma then, one day, after this incident, was studying Srimad Bhagavatam in a new light. He was now a pure devotee, and he was looking at one of the verses, which is one of the most famous verses of the Bhagavatam, which is 10.14.8. And that says, Tatenu kampamsu samikshamano bunjana evatma kritam vibhakam tadvagbapur vir viradam namaste jiveta yo mukti padaya sadhaya bhak. So when he heard this verse again, now from the Bhagavatam, with the new way of looking at the world, with the love of Krishna in his heart, he heard these words of mukti pade. And the word mukti is abhorrent, as our Tejas likes to point out. In the last couple youth jams, he's quoted verses from how devotees don't like mukti. This idea of merging into the Lord, or even being liberated. They're like, I don't want to be liberated. Na danam na janam na sundarim kavitam bhajagadishar kamaye. And then we have Prabhupada Saraswati, where he says that bhaktis tvai stirataya bhagavindidi syad kayavena not paritid Krishna daiva murti mukti swayam mukulitam jadi bhajate sman. He says, sorry, I mangled the verse. It'll come back to me later. That those who take the bhakti don't have to endeavor for liberation, because she stands outside. Mukti swayam mukalitanjali sevate sman. She's got folded hands. She's waiting outside the residence of the pure devotee, saying, "How can I serve you?" Dharmartha kama, and all the other goals, so-called goals of life. That dharma, artha, kama, and what to speak of moksha, they're all available to the devotee who takes devotional service. Vedeshu yagyeshu tapasu chaiva daneshu yat punya palam pratishtam adyeti sarvam idam baditvam yogis ramstanam upaiti charyam. I missed the word. So the Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, you if you just surrender to me, do devotional service, you won't be bereft of anything. And devotees don't even want liberation, because the devotional service is so sweet. And they can do it anywhere, in heaven or hell. It's equal to them. They just want to be engaged in Krishna's service. That's it. So Sarvabhauma brought this conundrum to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and said, Muktipadi, I'm going to change the Bhagavatam, he said. This is the the mood that he took up. Like, I don't like this mukti. It shouldn't be in the Bhagavatam. We should change it. Brahma shouldn't have said that. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, calm down. New converts, they get all excited. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, there's another way. Muktipadi also means the lotus feet of Krishna. And so actually we're taking shelter of Krishna's lotus feet, which provide mukti, because his name is Mukunda anyway. So don't worry, everything can be accommodated. The Bhagavatam can't be changed anyway. Prabhu. So we could see in Puri, all these churnings of pure devotional service take place. It's the place where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu goes to the Gambhira. Gambhira means deep. He goes deep into devotional service. There's a way that in the first portion of his life, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a great scholar. He showed his learning, and he was arrogant. He used to just love going around and tearing people to pieces philosophically. He'd mean, come on, tell me something. Tell me whatever. Whatever they tell him, he said, nah, and tear it apart. And they say, wow, that's amazing. He goes, it was wrong. I'll tell you something else. And he would twist people around and just bewilder their minds. He was such a great scholar. In fact, by the time he was just barely a teenager, he had his own college. He was like the dean. Everyone wanted to be in his school. And when the Keshava Kashmiri, the greatest scholar of India who was defeating everyone by the power of Saraswati, came to Navadvip, everybody left. Because I was like, I got to go. I think my mom called me to make some paratha. And they took off and went to a different state because they didn't want to be called upon by Keshava Kashmiri, who would just slice them up. And then it's like, see, you're not a Bhattacharya. But Nimai Pandit stayed purposefully, and there he was. He set the whole scene by being surrounded by his students. He was the cynosure of everyone, but his students, they loved him so much, and they had encircled him on the bank of the Ganga. The light was hitting him in a particular way. He was so beautiful. And when Keshava Kashmiri came into town, he had his elephants, and he's so proud, because this is what happens when you become competitive and you have some material skill and think, oh, I'm really something. You lose your perspective. That's why Kunti Devi says, Janmaishvarya Shruta Shribhir Edamana Madapuman Naivar Yavidatum Vai Twam Akinchana Gocharam. For to be perfectly connected to Krishna and Bhakti, should be Akinchana. It's like, I don't have any qualification. And the more one makes advancement in devotional service, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said when he listed the symptoms of bhava, there's 9 of them altogether. Shantir avyarta kalatvam, starting with, he says, the person feels less and less qualified as he becomes more and more advanced in devotional service. And so this very conceited scholar came in, and he saw Nimai Pandit, whom he had heard of. And then Nimai Pandit baited him and said, why don't you're so great. Let's hear some of your poetry. Just tell us some verses. So the Pandit then composed there without pen and paper, no computer, no dictionary, just from his brain. He composed 100 verses on the spot and just said them. And then everyone stood back in awe because he recited them, not recited them, he just composed them and spoke them like the blowing wind. And then Nimai Pandit glorified him and said, this is amazing. And then he became more puffed up. And he said, but, and whenever you hear that word, after somebody appreciates you, it erases everything. One of the nicest people I ever met. You're really smart. And actually everything you do is amazing. But, what do you mean but? And for somebody who's actually relishing their own expertise and thinking, I am somebody really great. And especially if it's a younger person says, but, then immediately the lights come on. And it's like, what are you talking about, but? There is no but when it comes to me. I know everything. I'm perfect. And whatever I said was perfect. And Nimai pointed out, well, let's analyze it. And, well, how are we going to do that? He just spoke them spontaneously, extemporaneously. Then Nimai picked out 2 verses. And the scholar was already on his heels because he said, wait a minute, how did you do that? I spoke those like the blowing wind. And Nimai said, it's no big deal. He said, some people are expert in grammar, other people know how to do composition. It's just something I was born with. I just remember stuff, that's all. They call me a Shrutidar. I don't even know what it is. It's just, it's a habit I have. So he was keeping low key with the scholar. And then systematically he mentioned in the verses the aspects that were faulty. He had made some redundancy, mistake, that it was ambiguous about Lord Shiva. And the scholar his mind began to swim. He wanted to say something to defend himself, but he couldn't say anything. Now, he had a deity, Saraswati, who's the goddess of learning, and he prayed to her every day, did worship for her. And she pretty much guaranteed him that anywhere you go, I'll be there with you, and we'll just fly, and you don't have to worry about a thing. But now, suddenly, it all stopped. It all stopped working. He couldn't get anything. Have you ever had that happen? You're preparing, and you think, like, wait till they see this. And then, I'm going to, really show him something, and all of a sudden, nothing comes out. And so he was humiliated, and some of Mahaprabhu's students began to chuckle because, the guy comes in and he's trying to make a show, and then it's kind of like one of those things where the David beats Goliath, and they were giddy, and it was like, ha ha ha. And Mahaprabhu was no. He was very serious. Don't laugh. He's a great scholar. He stopped them from laughing. And the scholar went to his encampment, and that night he had a dream. And Saraswati appeared to him and said, actually, you've met my deity. Although I'm your deity, you met my master and your master as well, Nimai Pandit. She revealed to him that actually that's the Lord. And she said to him that I couldn't speak in front of him. What can I say? He's my master too. And when the Keshava Kashmiri awoke, he had one thought in his mind: I have to go surrender to Nimai Pandit, to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he went back there to where Mahaprabhu was staying, and he offered his dandavats. And Mahaprabhu said, what are you doing? I'm just a kid. You're a scholar. And the Keshava Kashmiri Pandit said, no, I understand. You're my master. I'm surrendering unto you. And Mahaprabhu then empowered his heart with devotional service. From that day, Keshava Kashmiri went alone. Mostly people like Nadanam Janam Nasundarim. They want followers, like, hey, where is everybody? I'm here, follow along with me. But he didn't want anybody anymore. That's how his heart had changed. The elephant's gone. They just take him back. Repossess everything. I don't need anything more. I'm just going to wander and be a devotee of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He gave up his combative spirit of going around and challenging everybody, and just began to chant the devotional mantras and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very kind to everybody, and when he finished that chapter in Navadvip, he then did some preaching in South India. He had gone from Puri down to South India. And then at a particular time, Advaita Acharya, who's the one, as we know, who called Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to come into the world, to make his descent, to purify the world of all the nonsense that was going on. People were worshiping all kinds of weird deities they made up. They were spending all their money on ostentatious weddings and events just to show their wealth. And Advaita Acharya just was pining for the Lord, praying that he would come and spread bhakti so people could be again rectified. So Caitanya Mahaprabhu came, he took sannyas, he lived in Puri, he went to South India, he came back, he made many devotees, he sent Nityananda Prabhu off to Bengal to spread the movement, and made so many devotees here, there, and everywhere. Wherever he traveled, he went to Vrindavan. When leaving Vrindavan, he made devotees. Even from the Pathan Muslims, they saw Mahaprabhu, they heard him speak, they said, okay, I'm your disciple. And he just initiated them right there. He gave them new names. And he did that here, there, and everywhere. And then Advaita Acharya sent him a note saying, okay, you're done. You can go back. And he did it in an oblique way, saying that actually there's no more demand for rice in the marketplace. And Mahaprabhu said, okay, I understand. And Sarvabhauma Damodar also understood, but he said, what does it mean? It struck their hearts like his heart, like a thunderbolt. This means Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is going to change and go into a different mode and maybe wrap up his pastimes here in this world. And Mahaprabhu did. He then retired. He went in Puri into the Gambhira. There's a room there in Puri, just a small room where he did his constant remembrance of Krishna. And the way he did that was in the association of Sarvabhauma Damodar and Ramananda Roy, who stayed with him constantly, Lalita Vishaka, and reminded him of the Vrindavan pastimes by singing songs by Jayadev and from the Gita Govinda. And that's how Mahaprabhu would merge into his ecstasies, by hearing their songs, and deeper and deeper, something that could not be understood by the outside world. Therefore, he stayed in a secluded place and performed his pastimes there. He had many pastimes in Puri at the Tota Gopinath, which is a temple we'll also go to in Jagannath Puri, where Tota Gopinath was discovered. There's gardens there. And Mahaprabhu was digging one day and he found some deity. And then he gave those deities to Gadadhar Pandit to worship. Gadadhar Pandit was in his leela of showing old age, and it was hard for him to reach up, put the garlands on the deity. So one day he came back and they were sitting. So you'll see that they're lower to the ground, easier for Gadadhar Pandit to put the garlands on. And also in that place, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Tota Gopinath, at that place where the deities were established, he sat with Gadadhar Pandit for hours every day, and just heard Bhagavatam. And they would read the pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj hundreds of times. They hear him over and over again. It's a transcendental literature, so every time you hear it, it's ever fresh. It's never become old and hackneyed like regular literature. And of course, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left Puri to go traveling, Gadadhar Pandit wanted to come with him. But Gadadhar Pandit had already taken Kshetra Sannyas. Kshetra Sannyas, Prabhupada told Jananivas and Pankajangri to take Kshetra Sannyas, which means you dedicate yourself to one deity in one place in a dham, and you just stay there your whole life. You don't go off the premises, you just worship the deity. And so Gadadhar Pandit made that vow. But when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was leaving Puri to travel elsewhere, Gadadhar Pandit went with him. And he stayed a little bit at a distance, and Mahaprabhu kept telling him, what are you doing? Go back. And he said, no, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just over here, that's all. I'm not going with you. I just happen to be over on this side. And when they got far enough away from Puri, Mahaprabhu confronted Gadadhar Pandit, who's actually the internal potency. Srimati Radharani, they have this intimate, loving relationship. And he said to him, now, listen, enough. You've already broken your vow. Go back. Don't make it worse. And he told him, you have to go back now. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu turned around, got on a boat and took off, and Gadadhar Pandit fainted in ecstasy, not in ecstasy, in separation. Of course, that's a kind of ecstasy, but he couldn't stay conscious without Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Nonetheless, he did go back and worship Tota Gopinath Mahaprabhu later came back there. When he left his earthly pastimes, he left from Puri, merged into the deity of Tota Gopinath, and so did Gadadhar Pandit later. So all these leelas go on in the Holy Dham, and we have that in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Chaitanya Bhagavat. When we hear about these pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they're not only didactic, but they're also very attractive. So we can constantly hear about them and remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we'll just take a few comments or questions. Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Excellent presentation, Maharaj. I was just listening to you, and I was thinking like how much you are relishing that Leela, that its nectar is coming out of your mouth. So while you were describing that pastimes of the Sharabuja Leela, it struck me that there is a verse in that Shachi Shuta Astakam. It says Dhito Koti Dodo Kamandula Dandang Dibba Kalevara Mundita Vandang. And I always thought about it, that where he saw Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with Danda and Kamandula, because Danda was broken by Lord Nityananda. He was not carrying Danda anymore. And Kamandula was always carried by some servant. Lord Chaitanya did not carry it personally. Like in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is described like that. But now when you were describing that Sharabuja Murti, it came in my mind. Actually, he saw it in Sharabuja, because there Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is carrying both Danda and Kamandula together. So it makes sense that how he composed, when he composed that verse, how he saw that form of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Nice.
So I have another question, Maharaj. So
that wasn't a question, though.
No, that
so
was a comment, Maharaj.
Go ahead.
That how it dispelled my confusion. The second, I have a question regarding that the giving sannyas to the higher order. So usually we see that sannyas is given by someone who is already in that ashram, sannyasi. But in this case, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is telling that you are a Bharati Sampradaya, so you are a lower category. I will give you Saraswati or higher category sannyas. So how that happens? Like how someone who is not in that order himself, but he is giving someone that kind of sannyas.
It's a good point, and I've never really looked into it, but it's not gone into specifically in that point. That question isn't raised, like how could Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya give sannyasa initiation? But you're right, usually it's a sannyasi who gives it, as far as I know. But we can look into that detail, mark it, and we'll check it out. I think it's very interesting. Okay, Chakadola.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Haribo.
Guru Maharaj, I had two realizations. That first, how Krishna's plan can remove all of our sufferings. That people go to different peoples to get their advice and just to cure some of their suffering. But as Krishna is Supreme Personality of Godhead, and He has given us Bhagavad Gita, His supreme plan, and by using that we can remove all of our sufferings. And second, Guru Maharaj, you were telling about constant remembrance about Krishna. From that, I recalled one verse that Yadanujasina Yukta Karam Granthi Nibandana Chindanti Ko Vidastasya Kona Kuryat Tatha Yatharapi. That with the sword of knowledge one can cut the knots of fruitive activities, and who will not take the interest in hearing about the pastimes of Lord Krishna. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chakadola Prabhu, for always swimming in the nectar of the Shastra. So the first point, it's really nice to circle back to about plans. There's a old saying that the way to outsmart a genius is to have a better plan. Sometimes people are obviously geniuses, but then they don't have a good plan, and perhaps they're dysfunctional as far as the world goes. I've seen people like that many times. But even if you're of ordinary intelligence, if you adopt a better plan, if you have enough intelligence to figure out that there's a better plan, and you just follow that, then you become the greatest of all geniuses. That's the most intelligent thing you can do. Intelligent thing that you can do. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Mogasha moga karmano moga jnana vichetasya rakshasim asurim chaiva. Last verse. Prakritim mohitim shrita. that there's a way. Moga means baffled. So bafflement comes to those who follow their own plan. As inexplicably, somehow or other, our plans become non-productive in the material world. We'll hit some kind of a snag and we have to change them. And we may attain some kind of success from the plan that I thought I was following, but it always falls apart later on. Something's revealed that ruins the ultimate goal. However, if we sincerely try to follow Krishna's plans, even if we're imperfect in doing so, Krishna says, Apichet sudracharo bhajate mama nandyapak sadureva samantavya samgyag vyavasito hisa. That even if you follow my plan, but you're imperfect at doing it, still you're the best. And you're going to have success, ultimately. So it's an important point, because devotional service is simple. It means to find out, to the best of your ability, what Krishna wants you to do. And then just do that. And if you try to do that, even though you're not good at it in the beginning, you'll still come to the perfect stage. Tyaktva sadharmam charanam bhujam harer bhajana pakvota tato patet yadi yatra kwa babadram abuda mushakim kovarta apto bhajatam sadharmata. Narada Muni confirms that if you try to follow Krishna's plan and you give up some of the other plans everybody has for you in this world, it's like, okay, Shnikki, here's how it's going to work. You're going to be a doctor. We want you to be a lawyer. You understand? And you're following whatever dharma you were born into. You have to do this. You have to be a good rice grower or whatever. But then you say, nah, I think I'll just follow Krishna's program. That doesn't preclude being a lawyer, doctor, or a rice grower. But the idea is that if you take to the path of devotional service and you leave behind the intense practice to try to make things perfect in the material world, even if you fall away from the devotional path, he says, patet, you fall back down again because you were apakva, you weren't ready for it. He said, that's better than you got really good at your material plan, because that's definitely going to fall apart without question. So this is the mood of bhakti, that the material world is unpredictable. The plans we come up with in the material world don't work. And even if they do, then at the end, it's almost worse, because then you realize that you can't keep what you got. So better to just be a devotee and follow Krishna's plan. And then, yad anudyasina yukta karma granti nibandanam chindanti kovidastasya kona kuryat kataratim. The verse that Chakadola Prabhu just quoted from. What's the number? 1, 2,
15.
15? 19?
1 to 15.
15, 1 to 15. 1 to 15, yet anudyasina yukta karma granti nibandanam. So there's a karma granti that we're born into, this hard knot, which is because of our associations with the material world of so many lifetimes. And it's impossible to untie. Chindanti kovidas tasya. But those who are kovida, those who are intelligent, they cut that knot with a sword of practicing devotional service. Hearing about Krishna, it cuts the knot, so one becomes freed from the material world. Okay, now there's a couple more on the board, and then we'll come back to you. Okay, Risheshwari Leela, Hare Krishna. Good to see you there in Vrindavan.
Thank you, Maharaj. Yes, you've taken us to Jagannath Puri this morning. I'm very, very grateful to you, because since the yatra has been announced, I've just been praying how to enter this dham. I've had the chance to go to Govardhan with you, but I'm really looking forward that we can enter the dham with you. And thank you so much for just giving us that taste this morning. It's just brought me so many revelations. I can't decide where to begin. but I'm just so grateful that you allowed us to enter the Dham through your wonderful experience and realizations. And I just want to go back and hear this lecture again and again. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that Govardhan behind you there?
Yes.
It's the Parikram Marg. It's so peaceful,
right.
nice. You can just get out and walk, and then all your troubles are gone. You just walk around Govardhan, and you see that beautiful path back there. It goes through all these little forests, and you get to see different darshans of Govardhan, and you just walk and walk, and the atmosphere there is divine. It's you hear just peacocks, and then you hear a lot of parrots, and then you hear sometimes around Diwali a lot of explosions. But even those, I don't know, there's something about the ether there. There's like, So, going to the Dham, it's one of our practices to live in the Dham, to meditate on the Dham. And it's important to go there if possible. It's not necessary, but if possible, if it's available, and you can go and actually feel what it's like to roll in the dust there, to walk around, just to see things. Some impression will come into the heart, come into your heart by being there, especially if you're careful. Just be open, non-envious. Don't go there for any profit motive. It's like, I'm going to go there to enrich myself. I'm just going to go there to serve the Dham and to hear Bhagavatam in the Dham. And then if you go there like that, then you'll get some impression, a little gift you take home, and then you'll be chanting japa one day, anywhere, and suddenly you'll think, oh, I miss the Dham, I wish I was there. And then this begins our relationship with that, because it's a transcendental embassy from the spiritual world. And we should try to approach it either through remembering it, hearing about it from here, or from time to time going there and doing some service for a few days, and then bringing those impressions back from the Dham. Yeah, I remember the time we walked around the whole of Govardhan Hill, right, one morning.
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah. I think we did it twice, right? Not on the same day, but two separate occasions.
That's
right. Very memorable. Okay, thank you very much, Risheshwari Leela. And then pardon me? Okay. Tadiya Seva, Prabhu?
Maharaj, I was contemplating today on a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. I mean, yesterday and also a little bit today. It's about it says, Pumsastu Stri Maituni Bhavam, Ato Gruha Kshetra, Suta Apta Vitair, Janasya Mohoyam, Aham Mameti. So it's basically talking about the attraction between the male and the female in this material world. And it says that this attraction expands into Suta, his children, Apta, then relatives, and then Vitair, for money. I was just thinking, the majority of the population in this world, more or less is working for their children, their relatives, and their, for making money in the, maintaining bank balance. And I was wondering, these people are wasting their lives. So it is, so that we can see that 95% of the population is simply wasting their lives, is wasting their lives in these efforts. So only very rare souls have the opportunity to become devotees. I think, isn't it a big trap that this material world has put for the conditioned souls in the form of attraction to wife, children, and relatives and money?
Find the verse where if one is a devotee, if one is not a devotee, then also like it's in 14 chapters. Yes. Pumsastriya maitani bhavamitam tayomatur hridaya grantamahu. So because in the spiritual world there's attraction between male and female, and that's between Radha and Krishna. That's Krishna's, he's the energetic, and Radharani is the energy. And there's an eternal relationship between the two. Radha Krishna pranaya vikritir hladini shakti rasmat ekat manab api bhuvipura deha bedam gatautel chaitanyakyam prakadamadana tadvayam chaikyam aptam radha bhava duty suvalitam naumi Krishna surupam. So the two transcendentalists, Radha and Krishna, are eternally two. They're one person, but they've divided into two. And they have this eternal, ever-increasing, loving relationship in the spiritual world, which is the point of attraction for everyone. It's completely satisfying to hear about, to see, to remember, to participate in the loving affairs between Radha and Krishna. And this is what Gaudiya Vaishnavism is. And by hearing about this, by remembering it, by chanting about it, which is what we do when we say Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We're remembering the Leela of Lord Krishna and Radharani, the two who are eternally in a loving relationship. And Vikriditam Vrajavadu Birhamcha Vishnu, Shadhanvito Nashrinu Atavarna Yad Bhakti Param Bhagavati Pratilabhyakamam Hridrogam Ashvapahinotya Charina Dhiraha. The Srimad Bhagavatam says, if you become absorbed in this is reality. And your mind and heart will become purified of the propensity to become attached to the reflection of this. The reflection of that Leela is what we get in the material world. When we see this idea, seems like a good idea, right? Seems like a good idea. Doesn't it? Yeah, everyone's convinced that it's like, yeah, this is a good idea. Male, female, let's get together. So that this is what's happening. That's what drives the economy. There would be no Home Depot without it. It all goes on because this attraction between male and female. Where does it come from? Trace it out. It comes from Radha and Krishna. This is the Adiras, or the original feeling of love between male and female. Now, when you transfer it to the reflection of the material world, it becomes a great source of misery. And someone may say, no, I don't believe you. It's like, okay, go ahead. You just test it out. Hlada Tapatraya, Jiva Goswami says, what is fully blissful and enlivening and always increasing in happiness in the spiritual world, Hare Krishna, Radha and Krishna together. In the material world, it's just the opposite. It's the source of all misery. So that's hard to understand unless you know that it's a reflection. And therefore, the cause of weakness of heart is this fake out that happens when one looks at the world and said, no, it's here, it's real, and this attraction, this is real love. And because I don't know the origin of it, and I don't know the difference between one and the other. Therefore, Krishna says, Nasato vitite bhavo, nabhavo vitite sata, ubarior apidushnon tas tvanios tatvadarshidi. Study the categories of energy more carefully, sir, because there you'll find out that there's something that always persists. It's always there. It's real. It's eternal. And you could take shelter of it. And there's something else called the shadow reflection. That's the reflected image of that reality that's the material world. And there you will never get shelter, ever. And not only that, you'll be so bewildered by it that you'll be unhappy and you'll suffer because of it. So the real trick is to find out what is reality and to see that this is a reflected image, the material world of the spiritual world. Now, when you get to the philosophy of the Srimad Bhagavatam, can you fish out my glasses? Thank you. Then we find that householder life is not disparaged at all. In fact, in Caitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela, most of his pure devotees are grihastas. They live in houses and they have pots and pans. And you'll find also in Vraja Leela, in the spiritual world, in Goloka, most people are grihastas. That's what society generally is. However, we'll find this verse in the 10th canto, 14th chapter, 36th verse that says, that's 10, 14, 36 for those who are keeping score at home. Hey, that was good. Here we have Tavat. This is Brahma speaking still in 10:14. Tavat ragadayas Tavat kara graham Tavan mohon gring nigado yavat Krishna natejanaha. And here you have your word for the day. Tavat, for that long, raga adaya, material attachment and so on. Stena, thieves. Tavat, for that long. Kara graham, a prison. Graham, one's home. Tavat, for that long. Moha, the bewilderment of family affection. Ungri, upon their feet. Nigada, shackles. Yavat, as long as Krishna, O Lord Krishna, do not become te, your devotees, jana, any persons. And the translation, the reveal is, my dear Lord Krishna, until people become your devotees, their material attachments and desires remain thieves, their homes remain prisons, and their affectionate feelings for their family members remain foot shackles. So here's the purport. Apparently the residents of Vrindavana, the abode of Lord Krishna, are simple householders engaged in ordinary affairs, such as herding cows, cooking, rearing children, and performing religious ceremonies. However, all these activities are intensely engaged in the loving service of Lord Krishna. The residents of Vrindavan perform all activities in pure Krishna consciousness and thus exist on the most exalted platform of liberated life. Otherwise, the same activities performed without Krishna consciousness constitute ordinary bondage to the material world. Thus, one should not misunderstand the exalted position of the residents of Vrindavan, nor should one consider oneself highly religious simply because one performs ordinary domestic affairs very enthusiastically, but without Krishna consciousness. By focusing our passionate attachment on our family and society, we are completely deviated from the progressive path of Krishna consciousness. Conversely, if we engage our family in the loving service of the Lord, our endeavors to maintain our family become part and parcel of our progressive spiritual duties. In conclusion, by studying the extraordinary status of the residents of Vrindavan, we can see that the essential quality of their lives is pure Krishna consciousness, the rendering of loving service to the Lord without a trace of material desire or mental speculation. Such loving service to the original personality of Godhead immediately creates the atmosphere of Sri Vrindavan Dham, the kingdom of God. So we're not left hanging as the Gyanis are, who say, I am renouncing the material world. I won't touch anything here because I'll become contaminated and I won't be able to realize my godhood and so forth. But as the Bhagavatam also states, yet pada pankacha palasa vilasya bhakta karmashrayam gratitam udgartayanti santa tadvanda rikta matayo yatayo pirudha shrotoganas tamarnam bhajavasudevam. Those who just try to withhold their senses from the sense objects. And there are lots of ways that you can become militant and then declare war against your senses. For instance, how many of you would like to just sleep on the bare floor every day? Raise your hand. Malini would like it. You like that? Just the bare floor? Okay, how many of you would just like to have some soaked, let's see, barley soaked in the urine of a calf? That you could have every day for... Bharat had that. Well, Ram was in the forest for 14 years, right? You can have that? Because you want to sleep on the floor. I thought maybe you'd go for it. They go out of their way. In fact, some of the Catholic mystics, they used to do things like they wear a horsehair shirt. This is the most aggravating. If you've ever had like any little thing, some thread out of place or something on your shirt, it's like, I can't get comfortable. They would go out of their way to wear a shirt made of horsehair. And it's scratched, all day long, just so they could rise above their bodies and so forth. These measures aren't necessary. We're looking for tapodivyam putrakayena sattvam, which means devotional austerities, everything connected to Krishna. And when we engage everything in Krishna's service, modern day, we walk into any devotee's abode, whether it's an apartment, a townhouse, a big, huge house, whatever it is, it's all the same. It's all the same when you close your eyes at night. You can't see the thing. So once you get in there, the main thing is, where's the Bhagavatam set? Where's Bhagavatam Chaitanya Charitamrita? First question you ask. Where is it, right? You go into a house, come over, have some paratha, little, chutney. I must be getting hungry. And then you go in and it's like, where's Prabhupada's books? And it's like, I think I got a stomachache. I got to go. So I can't stay. That happened to me once in Vrindavan. I said, come on, we're going for lunch. I get in there. It's like, where's the books? Where's the deities? Where's it? Well, they don't have that. It's like, I feel sick. I got to go. I hear my mom calling me. She wants a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I'll be back later, which is never. So, we look, and then where's the first place we go? We look for the altar. And what's the first thing that a Vaishnava looks for? I'm getting a new apartment. It's like, where's the altar going to go? That's the big question. The books will go here, altar's here, then we're okay. And that's true. So we have to center everything around Krishna in our lives. And then it's blissful, because then you've got facility to spread Krishna consciousness. The more the merrier. Kids are the joy, become the joy of our life, that they're, becoming Krishna conscious. They spread it all over the world, and everything's fine. Otherwise, foot shackles. Okay, now we're going down to Mysore.
Dandavat Pranam Guru Maharaj,
Hare
all
Krishna.
to you. Maharaj, this past time that you talked of Keshav Kashmiri, that made me think that, this Vedic literature, Shastras are given by Krishna to liberate us, right, from this material world. And you also mentioned how by reading it repeatedly, this is transcendental literature, you get new realizations. But I was just thinking how the same reading can make someone a pure devotee, and the same reading can make someone puffed up, like how Keshav Kashmiri became, right? So there should be something more than the Vedic literature reading by itself. Is it the attitude, or what exactly is it that determines that by reading it multiple times you get new realizations and you do not get puffed up? If you could highlight that.
That's an excellent point. I'm glad you brought up the topic. Attitude is everything. Prabhupada brings this up in the preface to the Upadeshamrita. He said it's the attitude of the follower that will determine his or her progress in devotional service. Attitude is important. You'll find in the case of Tapana Mishra. Tapana Mishra was a great scholar. He knew everything. T.M., Tapana Mishra, too many books he had. And in that section, there's a verse that says, don't become a bookworm. Don't read too many books. The attitude sometimes is, I'm reading all these things because then I'll have an edge. And when I speak, I'm going to have something nobody else has. And, it's like they may say, but I'm going to bring out something else, a different opinion from another Shastra. You get into this mood of one-upsmanship in Shastra. This is the wrong attitude. Prabhupada used to say that we only need a few books. You just need the Bhagavatam, the Caitanya Charitamrita, Nectar Devotion. It's like, nah, that's not enough. I got to have more. I'm going to Low Bazaar. I'll load up a rickshaw full of books. And Prabhupada once said, he said, this process is so simple, chant Hare Krishna. If you can actually discipline yourself to sit down for longer and longer periods of time and hear the holy name and chant with feeling, even if it's for 10 seconds, in the span of chanting at least 16 rounds, then you'll attain perfection in life. But he said, he didn't say all that, that was my commentary. But he said, I noticed that, and it's in a purport, that my disciples, it's a simple process, chant Hare Krishna, but they're collecting so many austere books. Austere means like I'm not actually getting any nectar from them. It's satisfying this need I have to know everything. Of course, it's not bad to be well-read. One should be, and we should know all the relevant scriptures. We should be Shastra Sunipuna, that we know how everything connects together, what the Vaishnava canon is, what the various opinions of the acharyas are. That's okay. But if we become bookworms and read too many things, then we become confused, like Tapara Mishra. And then he didn't know the goal of life, so he was in a little bit of a depression. He was praying for help, and then he had a demigod-like person, like a Gandharva, very beautiful, appear to him in a dream and said, "You need to meet Nimai Pandit, who's right now in East Bengal." So he woke from his dream. He happened to go to the Ganga, and when he was there, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was there. And so he submitted himself to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, said, "I don't know what to do. I've read too many books." And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, "Chant Hare Krishna, go to Vanaras." And he gave him the specific purpose behind the Shastras, to worship Krishna, to chant Hare Krishna. So we should read in a devotional mood and look at Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's example. He heard the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj over and over again. You can read the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita many, many times, and there's always a new meaning that comes out. So we should read, but with the purpose of, there's a couple purposes. Prabhupada said, know enough verses from the Bhagavad Gita that you can teach it in public and be authoritative. You know where everything is. So he told my godbrother Madhavananda Prabhu, I have to confirm this, but I think he told me years ago that like 40 or 60 verses, if you know, from the Gita, well, then you can present Bhagavad Gita anywhere you go. And he said that would be good for you to do that. And also, if you become well acquainted, Prabhupada liked it if we specialize in one book. Know all of them, but he said, know something about everything and everything about something. And so in the Shastra, he liked it when devotees became very much acquainted with a particular book. Of course, you can move on and become acquainted with all of them. But if you pick from here and there and cherry pick, just so you can have this sense of, I know more than everybody else, that's the wrong attitude. And it doesn't help us to advance in devotional service. So one shouldn't become a bookworm. In fact, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, as you'll find in the Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav, didn't allow his students, his disciples, to keep a library in their rooms for this very purpose. He didn't want them to, apparently, get into that mood. Although he did ask them to study specific philosophies and compare them to Gaudiya Vaishnavism so they could present it in public and give people Siddhanta in articles and in public speeches. I hope that helps, but main thing is we don't know all the books. I mean, if you just make it your life's goal to get a PhD in the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Chaitanya Charitamrita, you're not going to come to the end of it in this lifetime. Especially if you take a little time to read Dhruva and Prahlad 100 times each. And you memorize a few chapters, you know all the verses in this one and that one, just because, if you go deeply within just what we have, then you'll know enough to go back to Godhead, for sure. And you say, okay, there's more cantos in the higher planets. That's in Tattva Sandarbha. 12 cantos, okay, go to a higher planet, you can get thousands of cantos. And we can imagine if we get those shipped here and how that's going to be taking them door to door. Okay, you want the Bhagavatam set? That'll cost you $10 million. Plus you have to move out of your house because there's no place to put them. So there's always more that we can go into, but take what we have. So Prabhupada made this point. He said, assimilate what you have first. He said, that's my point. You can read previous acharyas, but assimilate what you have first. Did you learn the Gita even? How about the Sri Upanishad or Upadeshamrita? Those are low-hanging fruits. And if you haven't taken advantage of that, but you like to pick and choose from like, well, I know this, I know that, then you may not be going deeply within the devotional mood of the Shastras. Okay. Prabhu, you had a point? Yes. The clock's running down. And I'll keep my answers shorter.
Prabhuji, very small thing, like the verse which Prabhuji mentioned on Zoom. So Kovidatasya, right? With the sword of knowledge, we cut down all the karma grandhis. So in that, I just remember one class which Radheshyam Prabhu shared. So on this verse, so he was telling that, so by the sword of knowledge, we definitely cut down, but to lift that sword, we need the bala, the power, and that comes from Balram. And like in our life, like how we see it comes from Guru and all our, in our life, the acharyas, the Siksha Gurus and Diksha Guru. So by serving them, those that sort of knowledge we can lift, and the meaning is that we get realization from like whatever knowledge we get, that become realization by serving the great soul, and then that actually cut down our attachments in this world, basically.
Yeah, as Shastra says, Yasya Devi para bhaktir yata Devi tata garao tasyaite katitahyarta prakashanti mahatmanaha. Only unto those who have implicit faith in the Guru and in Krishna simultaneously, to those the imports of the Vedic knowledge are revealed. And also, Nayamatma pravachanena labhyona medayana bahuna shutena mami vaisha vrinute tenas labhyas tasyaisha eva vrinute tanun swam, which means that you may become very expert in this or that, like you're the smartest person who ever lived, or you can speak better than everybody else, and so forth. He said, but it doesn't mean that you're going to get bhakti, because first of all, bhakti doesn't come from any material endeavor or expertise. It comes from Krishna, whomever he chooses. Nonetheless, your point is valid, and it's very important. Now, Prabhupada emphasized, like as a disciple, I went and sat in front of Prabhupada in San Francisco, and he said, you must also read my books. So then when that order comes, then you have to read them. That's part of the order, and he said it to everybody, actually, read my books. So then, yes, we get the bala from the Guru, who's a representative of Baladev, but then what did he say? How do you get it? Read the books. That's important, a point also. But it requires this, it's not a material endeavor. It's not intellectual, but it has to do with, devotional connection, as you're saying, to the internal energy. Prabhu, please give this devotee a microphone.
Prabhu, even after one has some understanding of the scriptures, the pull of Maya and our own desires and needs, they pull you back, and it becomes difficult to get out of that attachment and other things. So how does one weaken that hold and progress on the spiritual path?
It's very important to have clear Shastric knowledge, as we heard from the verse, and as you indicated, and others, that as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Gyanagni sarvakarmanam basmasat kurite tata, that just as a fire burns to ashes, unlimited wood supplied to it, so similarly, spiritual knowledge burns all the karma up. How does it do that? Because we're compelled by the previous impressions that we have within our heart to act in a certain way. That's what it means to follow Maya's path, that I follow my crab-like thing, own path. There is no own path. That's Maya's path, that she gave you a little chit and said, here's what you do today. And it's like, okay, whatever you say. But this is something we're forced into right now because of what we did before. Like people act in a certain way and they think, this is my idea that I like country and Western music. It's not your idea. Well, it is your idea, but it's an imposition on you from your previous experiences. It's not free choice. So when one gets spiritual knowledge, it burns up that nature or the way that we're impelled to act in a certain way, and we can rise to higher ground. So Krishna says at the end of the 3rd chapter, when he's answering Arjuna's questions, how do we overcome these unreasonable material desires that force us to do things we don't want to do. And Krishna says, Evam buddhi param buddhva samstabhyatmanamatmana jahishatram mahabaho kama rupam dvarasadam. So you have to fortify your intelligence. And when your intelligence becomes fortified, it becomes the ruler of the hierarchy of the mind and the senses. And if you can't depend on your buddhi when you're a soul and it gets contaminated and taken over, then you're finished. Because you're just using your intelligence to become duskriti. Kriti means expert, and du means bad. So you're really good at doing bad things, which is modern society. It's like they're really good at everything, but it's bad. It's wrong-headed. People have the wrong ideas. So when we get clear spiritual knowledge from Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, then our intelligence becomes fortified and we're able to make really good decisions. And not only that, Krishna says, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamupayanti te. That if you're devotional, if you try to serve me with love, even if you're not so good at Shastra, or you don't like to read, or you don't even, like I don't even have a guru, if you're sincere and you try, then Krishna from within the heart, he'll give you intelligence. He's so liberal, he just wants to help everybody. So he gives the intelligence how to overcome the obstacles of the material world. So we're never without help. Krishna is always helping us from within the heart, but Prabhupada said, God helps those who help themselves. He said, helping oneself means putting oneself in front of transcendental sound vibration. So we have to develop our intelligence to know the difference between listening to the vibration in the material world, some kind of, I don't know, I don't want to sing any songs here, but then there's that, like, and then you have the sound vibration of the spiritual world. And if you check them out side by side, they have very different quality. And to the contaminated mind and senses, like, oh, let me listen to this. But as we become purified by hearing transcendental sound vibration, touching the Dham, associating with pure devotees, we start to develop a taste for it. And we think like, no, I like this better. That's when we start to come over to the safe side. And when we get some ruchi, it's like in the beginning, we're pushing a big boulder up a hill. And when it gets to the top, and then it's going down the other side, it starts to roll. It starts to roll down, and now... dull, it's dull. So, or something. So we have to come to the safe side. And we need to fortify our intelligence and take advantage of Shastra. And then we'll come to a stage of ruchi. Okay, last, quick two.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Thanks for this wonderful class.
A little closer.
Can I?
Yeah.
I had the fortune of going to Jagannath Puri and Gambhira this Gaur Purnima, and I was really missing your association. I mean, you weren't there at that time, so but thanks a lot for making my trip complete by revealing all these amazing pastimes. I had a question. I mean, this is probably my 4th or 5th time in Jagannath Puri, and luckily I was able to overlook, the outside external coverings which is present in a lot of dhams. My question is not regarding what to do when you have those coverings, but my question is more like, why do you have those coverings in the holy dhams, like especially in Vrindavan and Jagannath Puri especially, actually? So if you could, if you so desire, you could just talk about it.
We don't see the world the way it is. We see the world the way we are. We filter everything through our minds. And therefore, in the Sri Brahma Samhita, Brahma says, Premanjana churita bhakti vilochenena santaksadeva hridayeshu vilokayanti yam shama sundarama chintya guna swarupam govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami. When your mind changes, your eyes change, you see everything differently. I had this experience once when I went to Scotland. And we had traveled a long time, and I got there at night, and a couple things happened. We went to the Mangalacharna and the sun started coming up, and I'm sitting there chanting japa. First thing I realized was Gorni Thai was the Gorni Thai I grew up with in San Francisco. Somehow or other, they took a boat and went to Scotland. I was like, how'd you get here? And they're looking at me, how'd you get here? And so, anyway, that was besides the point. But as I was sitting there and I was seeing all the beautiful deities and the pictures of Krishna on the wall, and I was chanting japa, I had this feeling that Krishna's always there. He's always there in his personal form, everywhere. I just can't see him because of my state of consciousness, which is that I don't really want to see him. I want to see what I want to see. I don't want to see Krishna. In fact, in Mahatma Prabhu's book that he came out with on bhakti, he asked this question. It's a very challenging question. If Krishna comes to you right now and says, let's go back to Godhead, will you tell him to wait? No. Yeah, think about it. You have, what about fill in the blanks? Yeah, but, and this is, kind of our conundrum. I'm absorbed at everything that I want to do. So we see the Dham according to the covering because of our own sense of a tendency to see matter, because our minds are absorbed in matter. They become like jada buddhi. It become like part of the material world, because whatever they associate with. Prabhupada once said, then they become like. Prabhupada once said that you meditate on a stone house. I want to live in a stone house. Anybody like stone houses? I mean, they're kind of nice, right? Big stones and, fancy fireplace, stone house. You know what I'm talking about, right? You don't see any here in California. You got to go somewhere else. Stone house. So he says, meditate in a stone house, live in a stone house, then your mind becomes stone. Because that's what you're meditating on. I got a stone house. I want a stone house. I paid $5 million for a stone house. Then you become stone. Because we become whatever we associate with. So due to our tendency to always see matter, to be absorbed in matter, and think that's my refuge, then wherever we go, including the Dham, we're only allowed to see this covering on the outside. And so we have to actually amend our own consciousness. And the way to do that when we go to the Dham is to hear and chant. Because as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said in a lecture, when our Prabhupada went there as a Bhai and had sat down at the yatra, he could only go for 1 day out of the 10 because he was so busy with family life and his business. So he went there, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was speaking on the last night, and there was an opportunity that everyone could go to see Sheshashayi Vishnu. It was last darshan possible. And so most of the crowd cleared out. And Prabhupada stayed there, and he listened. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was giving a lecture to a very sparse crowd. And in it he said, what will they see? Because you see by hearing. You don't see by going and be a looky-loo. We're not on a National Geographic tour here. Like click, 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 click. Just try to be in a devotional mood and you'll see Krishna everywhere. So I had that thought in Scotland. I was thinking Krishna's always there. His personal form's always there. But you could only see it when you're absorbed in that mood of bhakti and you want to see it. So to those who are extremely desirous, and they develop that desire by association with devotees who just are always eager to see Krishna, then we can also, Krishna reveals himself to those who want to see. Balaram.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
It's also a protection, I'm sorry. In the Brahma Samhita, you'll find that the Dham is surrounded by protectors. Lord Shiva's there in Vrindavan. You go see Lord Shiva before you go in the Dham. Say, "Can we come in?" Because he's protecting all the gates of Vrindavan. And you read in the Brahma Samhita in the early verses, it's surrounded by all kinds of weapons and people standing there because they don't want any goofballs coming in. It's like dum. Hey, you left your shoes on. It's like, no. This is a rarefied atmosphere. It's filtered. So it's covered over for those who are not yet completely serious in Krishna consciousness. Prabhu.
You mentioned that Mahaprabhu had this moment where he realized that his mission was completed and that he would go into his different mood. I was wondering what the specific indicators of that were in that moment. What did Advaita Acharya see that made him realize that now it's that his mission is completed here on this earth?
Well, they have this inexplicable relationship as described by Kaviraj Goswami. Who can understand the relationship between Advaita Acharya and Lord Chaitanya? They're the same person. I mean, we have to understand that. In all of Lord Krishna's or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, departure evita shantanama bipetya, or any of the other verses that describe how personality of Godhead is one, but he manifests himself in variety for his own enjoyment. So there's this rasa between Advaita Acharya, who's Mahavishnu. He's the one who glances at the material world and puts it into order. So he has this sense of responsibility in some ways to the material world that, participating with the Shrishti Leela, which is eternal, and the souls are entrapped in the material world. And, he calls the incarnation of the Lord to come and is like, you deliver them. It's Krishna. He's Krishna. Krishna comes, however, and each one of the various manifestations of Krishna play individual roles. So Advaita Acharya calls the incarnation, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, then when it's time, he tells me to go back. And that's the rasa that they have. And he just told it through that enigmatic poem about rice in the marketplace. It's saturated. Everybody has enough. And Mahaprabhu then says, okay, I'm moving on. And then Kaviraj Goswami said his mood changed and it almost became like insane pastimes, like a crazy person. He became so absorbed in the relishing the mellows between Radha and Krishna, which is why he came in the first place, as we know. Shri Radhaya pranaya mahima kidrisho vadiyaiva swadyo yena bhuta madharima kidrisho vamadiyaha saukyam chasya mad anubhavata kidrisho veti lobat tadbhavada samajani sachi garba sindhu harindu. He came to understand the depth of Radharani's love for him. So then, like Kaviraj Goswami says, insane performances. He's in the Gambhira, it's all locked up, but somehow he gets out. How does that happen? Not that he broke the lock. He just got out of the room. And then, he wanders on the seashore in ecstasy, falls into the ocean, and is floating, gets caught by a fisherman who thinks that he caught a ghost, because when he touches the body of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he starts to feel ecstasy. And then all the devotees are out looking for Mahaprabhu, and they're searching everywhere, and they're thinking, at any minute, of any of these pastimes, they're thinking, he could be gone now, and we're left behind. But then they meet this fisherman who's, and they say, what's wrong? And he's like, I touched a ghost. Where'd you find it? In the ocean. How'd that happen? Caught it in a net. What does it look like? It's really long and, it's distorted body. When I touched him, I started. So Swarup Damodar goes, and he slaps him in the face, says, I'm an exorcist. I just got rid of the ghost for you. And so then he says, where is he? Where's the ghost? And he said, over there, but don't go near him. And so they ran over there and they found Mahaprabhu, seaweed, and his body's been in the ocean and he's caught in a net. And they go over and it's Mahaprabhu and his body's completely distorted. These are the wild, mad pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Puri. And then they chanted and he awoke and he said, why'd you wake me up? I was absorbed. And these things go on 24 hours a day. He couldn't sleep at night, so Shankar Pandit went in. He's known as the pillow of the Lord. He would hold the Lord's lotus feet on his lap all night long just to make sure he didn't break out. They couldn't contain him. The ecstasy was so deep. And it's all coming from that one room in Jagannath Puri. That was a long answer and more than you asked for, but just reminding us of the various sections of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. And the thing is, all these things may sound just fantastical, or they may seem like maybe they're irrelevant to me. But when you go to the Dham and you actually stay there and you see other people worshiping there and you feel a depth of emotion there in that place, if you have spontaneous, if there'll be a combustion at some point when you're hearing and chanting in that place where you get touched by that energy, and then you'll feel like you have some spiritual wealth that you didn't have before. And we have to, just like, as you're growing up in the world, you have to develop wealth. You have to collect it, invest it, and protect it. And the same thing for our lives. We have a short amount of time. We have to try to become spiritually wealthy so we can afford to go on vacation to Goloka Vrindavan. And that one of the ways of doing that is to hear about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the association of devotees. And if you can do it in the Dham, it's really nice to do. So that brings us to the end of today's session. So now we're going to have the Guru Puja. So we'll roll up the carpet and also move the asanas out of the way, and we'll reassemble here in 3.5 minutes to sing some prayers. Hare Krishna.